They sold you a story early, a soft one, wrapped in words like empathy, loyalty, sacrifice. You were taught that being available makes you good, that being open makes you strong, that showing up for everyone is how you earn respect. But here's the part no one said out loud. Availability is exposure. And in a world that runs on leverage, exposure gets exploited. Think about it. How often do you check in on people who wouldn't notice if you vanished for a month? How many times have you explained yourself to people who never tried to understand you? You show up, you give energy, you clarify, you reassure. And what do you get back? Confusion, disrespect, silence. That's not bad luck. That's a leak in your power. Your first mistake wasn't failing. It was spreading yourself thin. Power doesn't come from being everywhere. It comes from being concentrated, focused, directed, like a blade instead of fog. The moment you divide your attention across too many people, too many conversations, too many emotional obligations, you weaken your position. Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology tried to dress weakness up as virtue. The man who splits his focus loses control. Every unnecessary explanation drains you. Every emotional battle that isn't yours pulls you off your path. You think you're being mature. You think you're being kind. But really, you're bleeding attention for approval. And approval is the currency of the powerless. If you want respect, real respect, not the polite kind, you have to become the center of your own world. Not in a loud way, not in an insecure, attention-seeking way. In a strategic way. The kind of self-focus that makes people adjust when you stop bending. This isn't selfishness. It's structure. The weak will call it narcissism because they can't stand someone who doesn't orbit them. But power has never been loud. It's quiet, internal, disciplined. You don't need permission to isolate and build. You don't owe explanations for cutting off distractions. The moment you realize your mind is the only battlefield that matters, life starts responding differently. Not because people suddenly become nicer, but because you stop needing them to be. Focus solely on yourself. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because you finally see the truth. No one is coming to save you. No one will hand you power. No one feels your pressure the way you do. Transformation starts the moment you pull your energy back from the crowd and aim it inward. And when you do, something strange happens. Your silence gets louder. Your absence gets heavier. And that unsettles people. If you're ready to stop chasing and start building, hold that thought. Because now we need to expose the first trap that keeps men weak. The illusion of loyalty. They don't need chains to control you. They just need to convince you they care. That's the most effective leash there is. False loyalty dressed up as emotional language. I'm always here for you. We're a team. Don't change. Sounds supportive. Feels warm. But watch what happens when your priorities shift. When you stop being available. When you start saying no. That loyalty disappears fast. Because it was never loyalty. It was access. What people often call friendship is really dependency wearing a friendly face. You keep people around because they once made you feel seen, but that feeling comes with a cost. A leash you pretend isn't there. You hesitate to grow because you're afraid it might make them uncomfortable, afraid it might trigger jealousy, afraid they'll say you've changed. So you shrink. You lower your ambition. You soften your edges. You delay your evolution to protect their comfort. That's not loyalty. That's submission. And it's a form of psychological warfare most people never learn to detect. Machiavelli warned about this centuries ago. The most dangerous people are not always your enemies. Sometimes they're the ones closest to you. The ones who drain you slowly, politely, with a smile. They ask for your time, your presence, your emotional labor. And they call it love. But the second you draw a boundary, suddenly you're cold. Suddenly you're selfish. Suddenly you've betrayed them. That's not love. That's control. And if you don't cut it, it will bleed your future dry. You cannot evolve while babysitting egos. You cannot rise if you're scared of being misunderstood. And you cannot become anything powerful while dragging people who only recognize the version of you that served them. Every second you give to someone who isn't building with you is a subtraction from your own empire. Your silence is not cruelty, it's precision. Let them call it cold. Let them call it selfish. You call it strategy. If their loyalty only existed when you were useful, it was never loyalty. It was a cage. Now comes the second truth most men avoid. The past is a liability. You are not who you were 5 years ago. You're not who you were last year. You're not even who you were this morning. But if you keep dragging that outdated identity behind you, don't be surprised when your results stay the same. The past only survives because you keep feeding it. In your thoughts, in your language, in the stories you tell people about who you are, and those stories become prisons. You forge them early, in fear, in pain, in survival mode. And now you polish them like they're something sacred. They're not. The world isn't holding you back. You are, because you keep showing up as the version of yourself everyone expects. The nice guy, the helper, the overthinker, the apologizer. And that version gets predictable results. Rejection, disappointment, being overlooked. Predictable men are forgettable men. You want transformation? Then disappear, burn the script, re-enter without explanations, with silence, with mystery, with a presence that no longer asks for permission. Machiavelli didn't wait for recognition. He built systems that forced the world to adapt to him. He understood reinvention wasn't vanity. It was survival. Consistency doesn't make you reliable. It makes you easy to map, easy to use, easy to eliminate. Real power lives in unpredictability, in evolution so aggressive that even your enemies lose track of you. You don't owe anyone an explanation for changing. You owe yourself a revolution. Let the weak complain that you're different. Let the familiar beg for the version of you that kept them comfortable. You evolve anyway, quietly, relentlessly. You erase the past not with words, but with action. When they ask what happened to the old you, the answer is simple. He died when he realized no one cared unless he was useful. That's where freedom starts. And that's where we'll go deeper next. Into emotional detachment, and why learning when not to feel is the most dangerous skill you can master. Let's go deeper. Because once you cut false loyalty and burn the past, something uncomfortable surfaces. Emotion. The reactions you were trained to obey. The impulses that decide your moves before your mind ever gets a vote. Most people live like this. Anger controls their mouth. Fear controls their decisions. Desire hijacks their focus. Then they wonder why they're easy to manipulate. Here's the rule no one teaches you. The moment someone can predict your emotional reaction, they own you. Predictability is permission. If someone knows what triggers you, they can steer you. If they know what you crave, they can bait you. If they know what scares you, they can freeze you. That's not theory, that's leverage. And most men hand it over freely because they confuse emotional expression with authenticity. You were told that feeling deeply makes you human, and that's true. But no one told you that uncontrolled feeling makes you weak. Emotional detachment isn't about becoming numb. It's about becoming selective. You still feel. You just decide which emotions get to sit at the table and which get thrown out like broken weapons. Because when you're reactive, you're not living. You're being piloted. Every insult that pulls a response out of you. Every message that spikes your anxiety. Every silence that makes you spiral. That's not emotion. That's conditioning. And the world is full of people who rely on that conditioning to get what they want. Here's the shift. When someone tries to provoke you, it's not personal. It's strategic. They're testing your self-control. When someone disrespects you, ignores you, ghosts you, or withdraws attention, that's not betrayal. That's information. Most people take that information and turn it into suffering. They chase closure. They demand explanations. They replay conversations. They try to fix what they don't control. And in doing so, they hand over the knife and let others cut them repeatedly. Detachment changes the game. When you stop reacting emotionally and start observing behavior like a tactician, you become immune to most manipulation. Insults slide off. Praise loses its grip. Flattery stops working. You're no longer pulled by approval or crushed by rejection. You sit at the center of your own gravity, calm, cold, focused. That calm isn't weakness, it's pressure. Emotional detachment allows you to say no without guilt, to walk away without leaving a door cracked open, to burn bridges that only led back to places you already outgrew. And most importantly, it creates space. Space to think, space to plan, space to rebuild. You stop wasting energy on chasing, explaining, and pleasing. You redirect it into control over your reactions. And control is power. People think being emotional makes them real. It doesn't. It makes them readable, predictable, replaceable. The most powerful men you've encountered weren't loud. They didn't overexpress. They didn't perform. They were quiet. And silence, when mastered, becomes psychological pressure because it forces people to guess, and uncertainty makes them uncomfortable. That's the edge. If you want to be unbreakable, you don't harden your heart. You discipline it, cold where it counts, calm where it hurts, focused when others fall apart. That's not emptiness. That's evolution. Now let's talk about the next layer that decides who you become long before motivation ever shows up. Your environment. You think your mindset is yours. It isn't. You think your thoughts are private. They're not. Every sound you hear, every screen you stare at, every room you spend time in, every person you tolerate, all of it programs you. Your environment isn't just where you live. It's what lives inside you. And if you don't design it intentionally, it will design you by default. Look around. Most comfort zones aren't comforting. They're sedating. Beds you didn't earn. Screens that poison attention. Conversations that drain focus. And it all gets labeled normal. There's no war outside. The war is already inside. And the enemy is familiar, quiet, comfortable, designed to keep you forgettable. Power isn't just about will. It's about allowance. What you allow near you, what you tolerate daily, what you normalize. Every object, every habit, every influence is either sharpening your edge or dulling it. There is no neutral. The chair you sit in, the noise in the background, the clutter on your desk, the people in your orbit. All of it either serves your rise or sabotages it. If you want to become untouchable, you need to become ruthless about engineering your world. Start with silence. Silence is the foundation because without it, you can't hear your own thinking. Then strip distractions one by one. Notifications that don't serve you. Conversations that go nowhere. Rooms that remind you of failure, laziness, or dependence. Remove them. Replace them with space that demands presence. Your room is a mirror of your mind. If it's chaotic, so are you. If it's noisy, so are you. If it's filled with empty entertainment and meaningless objects, that's not coincidence. That's reflection. Until you clean your environment, you'll stay stuck. You'll wake up tired. You'll crave dopamine. You'll confuse stimulation with progress. And others will watch you sabotage yourself with a setup you refuse to change. 10 minutes of motivation won't undo 10 hours of environmental programming. Your walls, your desk, your phone are whispering instructions into your subconscious all day. Most of them say the same thing. Stay comfortable. Stay passive. Stay the same. If you don't rewire that battlefield, you won't move forward. And then there are people. Who gets access to your energy? Who speaks into your day? If they aren't disciplined, evolving, or focused, why are they there? You don't need drama to walk away. You don't need permission to detach. You observe habits, language, mindset. If someone reflects your past instead of your future, you cut ties quietly. No debate, no guilt, no announcement. Power isn't about addition. It's about subtraction. You subtract comfort. You subtract chaos. You subtract weak voices. That's how focus sharpens. That's how you build a world others can't reach because they don't even recognize the terrain you operate on anymore. And that's intentional. Stop apologizing for isolating. Stop explaining why you disappeared. Stop negotiating with people who live in distraction. You don't owe them clarity. You owe yourself results. When you walk into your space, your energy should rise. When you open your phone, it should give direction, not fog. That's the mark of someone who understands the mind is programmable and decided to become the programmer. Because next, we have to confront the most invisible killer of power there is. Not emotions, not people, time. And once you see how seconds turn into regret, you'll never waste another day the same way again. Time is the one thing you keep treating like it's unlimited. You act like it stretches, like you'll get more later, like youth puts you ahead of the clock. But here's the truth most men learn too late. Time isn't patient, and it isn't kind. It doesn't warn you, it just takes. Every second you waste isn't a mistake against others. It's a betrayal of yourself. You weren't born with power. You weren't born with influence or leverage. The only currency you had at birth was time, and the only difference between the powerful and the forgotten is how they used it. Same 24 hours, different discipline. The weak spend time. The powerful invest it. And most of what drains you doesn't look dangerous. It looks harmless. Scrolling, waiting, reacting, group chats, background noise, aimless conversations. You call it relaxing. You call it staying connected. But what you're really doing is bleeding minutes into places that give nothing back. You're not tired. You're distracted. You're not burned out. You're unstructured. You're not stuck. You're leaking time to habits and people that don't move you forward. Time doesn't make you wiser by default. Without pressure, it makes you softer. And the more you entertain comfort, the more time becomes a leash instead of a ladder. If you want discipline, control, and power, you have to track your time the way a ruler tracks gold. Because every hour is either building your future or building someone else's. There is no neutral use of time. Look at your day honestly. How much of it is reaction instead of design? You wake up and check your phone before your own thoughts. You eat while scrolling. You walk while scrolling. You rest while consuming noise. Your time isn't yours anymore. It belongs to algorithms, ads, and dopamine loops. That's not living. That's being programmed. Here's the shift. Time responds to ruthlessness. The moment you cut what doesn't serve you, useless tasks, fake emergencies, weak habits, time opens up. Hours appear where others only see excuses. You build while others distract themselves into decay. You don't need more hours. You need to kill what's stealing them. That means cutting off people who talk more than they act. Deleting apps that give you nothing but fog. Owning your mornings. Defending your nights. Treating your schedule like a battlefield. Because it is. Discipline isn't motivation. It's elimination. It's removing everything that delays your rise. Silence becomes standard. Direction replaces motion. You stop being busy and start being dangerous. There's a difference between movement and progress, between activity and threat. The world is full of people running in circles, burning daylight to feel productive. But the one who sits still, plans clearly, and executes without emotion, that's the one who wins. And that's the version of you being built right now. You don't need to explain why you're unavailable. You don't need to feel guilty for turning your phone off. You don't need permission to protect your time like it's sacred, because it is. Now comes the next trap. One that feels noble, one that's praised, one that quietly destroys men. Helping everyone. You were taught that being helpful makes you good, that sacrificing your time and energy gives life meaning, that serving others earns respect. But here's what no one told you. Most people don't respect generosity. They exploit it. The more you give, the more invisible you become. You think being reliable gives you power. It doesn't. It makes you predictable. And the man who is always available is never valued. You solve problems. You show up. You carry weight that isn't yours. And when you finally say no, you're suddenly selfish. That's not loyalty. That's dependency. Look closely. Who benefits when you overextend? Who gains when you put others before your own goals? While you're busy fixing their chaos, your life stalls. While you help them move forward, your progress starves. Self-sacrifice doesn't make you noble. It makes you disposable. The more you help out of guilt or the need to feel useful, the more you condition people to take from you. They expect it. They rely on it. And eventually, you start feeling guilty for choosing yourself. That's how deep the trap runs. You become a tool in someone else's survival. A background character in your own life. And they don't even notice. They just keep asking for more. Here's the brutal truth. Every unnecessary favor lowers your value. Scarcity creates power. Availability kills it. Your time should feel expensive. Your attention should feel earned. Your presence should feel rare. That's how value is built. Helping people isn't wrong. Overhelping is. Power moves with intention. Weakness moves with impulse. You help when it aligns with your mission. When it multiplies return. When it doesn't drain your future to stabilize someone else's comfort. You are not here to babysit chaos. You are not responsible for fixing people who refuse to fix themselves. You were built to dominate your own world, and that requires detachment. Most men will never understand. You give when it's deserved. You walk away when it isn't. No drama, no speeches, no guilt. You're not here to be liked. You're here to win. Your kindness was mistaken for softness. Your empathy was used as leverage. Your time was drained like it was worthless. That phase ends now. From this point forward, your help is earned, not given. You move with people who carry their own weight, or you move alone. And when you do, something shifts, which brings us to the next level of power, the one that doesn't speak, the one that doesn't explain, the one that controls rooms without saying a word. In the next part, we break down presence, silence, and how dominance is felt long before it's heard. Most people think power is loud. They think it lives in the voice, the speech, the explanation. They believe if they just say the right thing at the right time with enough confidence, they'll command respect. That's the lie. Real power doesn't argue. It doesn't over-explain. It doesn't announce itself. It enters the room, and the room adjusts. You've felt it before. Someone walks in and the energy shifts. They're not smiling too much. They're not performing. They're not trying to be liked. They're grounded, still, unreadable. And without saying anything, they dominate attention. That isn't charisma. That's control. Control over emotion. Control over self-image. Control over the need to be seen. And that control creates pressure. Psychological dominance without aggression. Most men talk themselves out of power. They fill silence because they're uncomfortable with it. They explain themselves because they fear being misunderstood. They overshare because they're afraid of being forgotten. And every time they do it, they shrink. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is space. And space makes people project. The moment you speak, you reveal something, your thinking, your position, your insecurity. But silence forces others to guess. And when people guess, they reveal themselves, their motives, their fears, their need for control. That's why silence is strategic. Stop filling space just to feel safe. Stop explaining yourself before anyone asks. Stop leaking emotional tells through nervous movement, over-smiling, or constant reassurance. That's not confidence. That's insecurity dressed up as friendliness. Presence is built when your body says calm, your face says nothing, and your energy says, I don't need to be here. I choose to be. This is where most men fail. They try to control opinions. They chase approval. They over-deliver, over-talk, and overshare because they're terrified of being misunderstood. But here's the rule. The man who fears being misunderstood will never be respected. Respect comes from self-containment, from someone who doesn't rush to correct perceptions, who doesn't flinch at misinterpretation, who lets results speak later. Your posture speaks before your words ever do. Your eye contact communicates more than paragraphs. Your stillness carries authority because it signals control. When you master silence, dynamics flip. Others talk more. They fill the discomfort. They explain themselves. They expose insecurities while trying to read you. You become the mirror they can't decode. That's dominance without confrontation. A man who doesn't react to insult unsettles people who rely on chaos. A man who doesn't light up from praise confuses those who trade in validation. A man who stands firm, calm, and focused feels dangerous because nothing pulls him. People are always scanning. How fast you speak, how often you blink, how much you shift, how needy your energy feels. And most men broadcast insecurity without realizing it. Presence isn't projected, it's held. And it only forms when your internal world is colder, calmer, and more committed than anything outside of it. You don't chase attention, you create gravity. You don't ask for space. You occupy it. That power doesn't come from ego. It comes from mastery. Mastery of time. Mastery of silence. Mastery of emotional restraint. Once that locks in, you'll notice people adjusting around you subconsciously. They speak differently. They hesitate. They respect boundaries they were never told about. That's real power. Not what you say, but what they feel when you say nothing. And now we reach the final layer, the one that ties everything together. The one society hates the most because it breaks control. Ruthless self-interest. You were trained to believe focusing on yourself is wrong, that putting your goals first makes you selfish, that ignoring the emotional chaos of others makes you cold. But look around. Men who put everyone else first end up empty, forgotten, and used. Not because others were evil, but because they allowed it. You thought sacrifice would lead to appreciation. It doesn't. It leads to irrelevance. Self-interest isn't cruelty, it's clarity. Clarity about power, about limits, about human nature. Here's the law. People will use you as long as you make yourself available. The moment you stop prioritizing yourself, others prioritize extracting from you. That's not pessimism. That's reality. You were told selflessness is virtue, that you should drop everything when others need you. But ask yourself, when you break down, who shows up? When you go silent, who notices? Exactly. That's when you learn the truth. You are either your own priority or you are no one's. Self-interest doesn't mean hurting others. It means refusing to hurt yourself to keep them comfortable. It means choosing your health, your discipline, your future over their distractions and manipulation. You don't need permission to evolve. You need discipline to protect it. Most people want you soft, available, and helpful because that version of you benefits them. The moment you stop fixing their chaos, you become the villain. Distant, cold, selfish. That's how you know you're on the right path. Putting yourself first will always offend those who relied on you putting yourself last. You cannot build anything meaningful while babysitting. You cannot conquer while explaining your every move to people who've built nothing. You cannot transform while emotionally tethered to those who fear your independence. Cut the guilt. Kill the approval-seeking. Anchor one truth in your spine. If it doesn't serve your purpose, it doesn't deserve your time. Self-interest gives you the power to say no without debate. To choose discomfort now for power later. To endure loneliness because what you're building demands isolation. That kind of focus makes people uneasy. They can't access it. They can't control it. And they can't stop watching. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be remembered. And in the final part, we'll bring everything together. How silence, detachment, discipline, and ruthless focus turn you into something no one can manipulate, interrupt, or reach. This is where everything converges. The silence, the detachment, the elimination, the precision. This is the point where you stop trying to improve and start becoming something else entirely. Not a better version of the old you. Not a polished upgrade. A different entity. One built on focus. Powered by indifference. Immune to validation. Unaffected by rejection. Untouched by noise. Most people think transformation is about doing more. More effort. More hustle. More motivation. But the truth Machiavelli understood is colder than that. Real transformation comes from doing less, with more intensity. It's about cutting, subtracting, simplifying, removing everything non-essential until what remains is lethal. The man who focuses solely on himself doesn't just win. He becomes the standard. He no longer reacts. He no longer explains. He no longer pleads to be seen. He is seen without speaking because the energy he carries speaks before language ever can. By now, you've felt it. That internal shift. That quiet voice saying, "I'm done begging. I'm done explaining. I'm done performing for people who wouldn't bleed for me." That isn't ego. That's clarity. That's the birth of the real you. Not the version shaped by family, teachers, friends, or expectations, but the version you chose through silence, sacrifice, and brutal inner war. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. You don't need more advice. You don't need more motivation. You need isolation. Deep isolation. Sacred isolation. The kind that forces your focus inward until distractions die from neglect, until cravings dissolve, until excuses evaporate, until the only voice left in your mind is your own, and it speaks with authority, not confusion. This is where you stop seeking freedom and become it. Because no one owns you anymore. No one controls your emotions. No one has a leash on your time. No one can access your energy without purpose. You've detached from everything soft. You've chosen the cold path, the quiet path, the path where they call you selfish, distant, arrogant, antisocial, and yet they can't stop watching. They can't stop wondering what happened to you. They can't stop feeling the shift when you enter a space. They can't stop sensing that something about you is unreachable. This is what happens when you obey the coldest law of power. Focus solely on yourself, not as a phase, not as a trend, as doctrine. You become hard to access, impossible to manipulate, emotionally invisible to the weak. You start showing up in places they never imagined you'd reach, achieving things they never believed you could do. And you do it without them, without noise, without compromise. Let them misunderstand you. Let them label you. That's their language. Weakness. Yours is action, silence, mastery. You don't clarify who you are. You become something so disciplined, so precise, so unexplainable that it breaks their mental frameworks. While they drown in opinions, you rise through structure. While they chase attention, you build leverage. While they ask, "What happened to you?" you've already moved on to the next evolution. At this stage, your goals are no longer about proving anyone wrong. That phase is over. Revenge is beneath you now. You've stepped beyond it. Now it's about proving yourself right. It's about designing a life so exact, so cold, so aligned with your mind that no one else can breathe in it unless you allow them. That's power. And that's where you're headed if you stay locked in. So take this as both a warning and an invitation. Guard your focus like your life depends on it, because it does. The enemy doesn't arrive with force. It arrives with a notification, a distraction, a harmless conversation, a casual request. Something small enough to justify. And if you're not alert, you soften. You slip. You drift back into average. But if you stay cold, if you stay disciplined, if you stay deliberate, nothing touches you. You don't need a throne to be a king. You don't need followers to have influence. You don't need recognition to become legendary. All you need is a mind that cannot be hijacked and a life that cannot be accessed without purpose. So here's the final command. Disappear into your mission. Rewire your environment. Cut the noise. Kill the old identity. Reject everything that pulls you off course, no matter how small. You were never here to serve the world. You were here to conquer your own. And once you do, the world bends without being asked. If you're done explaining yourself, if you're done sacrificing power for comfort, if you're done living as something others can reach, then say it now and mean it. I don't need to be understood. I'm here to be unreachable. Before we close this, there's a final truth you need to face. This path does not reward you with applause. There is no crowd when you choose discipline over comfort, silence over explanation, focus over validation. In fact, the clearer you become, the quieter the world around you gets. And that silence is not punishment. It is confirmation. At some point, you will notice the shift. Fewer messages, fewer invitations, fewer people checking in. Not because you're failing, but because you are no longer available for emotional extraction. You stepped out of the system where attention is traded for compliance, where access is mistaken for loyalty. Most people don't know how to interact with someone they can't read. Guilt, rush, or control. This is where weak men turn back. They confuse loneliness with loss. They mistake distance for failure. They rush back to noise, drama, and explanation just to feel included again. But inclusion was never the goal. Power was. And power demands separation before it delivers results. Understand this clearly. What you are experiencing is not isolation. It is separation. And separation is the price of clarity. You are not becoming colder in the way they mean. You are becoming deliberate, intentional, surgical. Your reactions slow down because fewer things deserve them. Your decisions get faster because your standards are higher. Your energy feels heavier because it's no longer leaking into places that can't multiply it. This is what self-mastery looks like when it stops being motivational and starts being real. You won't argue the way you used to. You won't defend your boundaries. You won't over-explain your choices. Not because you don't care, but because you finally understand something most people never learn. Explanation is often a form of permission. And you no longer need permission to become who you're becoming. Distractions will still appear. Invitations will still come. Emotional hooks will still be thrown your way. The difference now is that you recognize them instantly, not as opportunities, but as tests. Tests of focus. Tests of discipline. Tests of whether you respect your own mission enough to protect it. And you will pass those tests quietly. People will say you've changed. Some will say you're distant. Others will say you've become cold, selfish, or arrogant. What they're really saying is this: you no longer revolve around us, and that discomfort is not something you are meant to fix. Your responsibility is not to be understood. Your responsibility is to stay aligned. Aligned with your goals when no one is watching. Aligned with your discipline when motivation disappears. Aligned with your standards when loneliness tries to negotiate with you. This path is not about cruelty. It's about precision. You still choose kindness, but only when it doesn't cost your future. You still help, but only when it doesn't weaken your structure. You still connect, but only with people who respect your boundaries without testing them. Everyone else fades on their own. Here's the truth most people will never admit. The goal was never to dominate others. The goal was to dominate yourself so completely that no one else ever gets the steering wheel again. When you do that, influence becomes a side effect. Respect becomes automatic. Control becomes internal. Life stops feeling chaotic because you have removed yourself from systems that thrive on chaos. You stop reacting, you start designing, you stop explaining, you start executing, you stop chasing, you start attracting, and slowly, without ceremony, you cross a line. On one side of that line is the old life. Noise, approval seeking, emotional bargaining, endless distraction dressed up as connection. On the other side is something quieter, colder, and far more dangerous. Clarity. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you feel what it's like to move through life without needing validation, without being emotionally accessible to everyone, without apologizing for your focus, you cannot go back. Not because you're trapped, but because returning would feel like self-betrayal. So don't announce your transformation. Don't document it. Don't ask for understanding. Let your absence do the work. Let your consistency speak later. Let your results introduce you when words no longer matter. You are entering a phase where fewer connections are required, fewer opinions are tolerated, and fewer emotions are allowed to drive decisions. That's not emptiness. That's alignment. That's a life finally built around intention instead of reaction. Stay cold where it counts. Stay disciplined when it's boring. Stay silent when the world wants a performance. This isn't the end of the journey. It's the point of no return.